The ground shook like something angry lived beneath it. I was running on fumes and a bad knee, picking my way through what used to be a Veltari settlement on Kira 7. 3 hours ago I had a squad. Now I had half a magazine, 1 field med kit, 2 ration bars, and the distinct feeling that the universe had stopped caring whether I made it home. The Kethar bombardment had split us clean apart. Not killed us, just scattered us, like seeds in wind, which was almost worse. Scattered meant alone. Alone on Kira 7, with Kethar patrols sweeping the rubble grids every 40 minutes, meant you had to be very quiet, and very smart, and very lucky, and I had already used up most of my luck before breakfast. I moved through what had been a market square. The archways were still standing, mostly, carved from pale stone in the Veltari style, all flowing curves and 6-pointed patterns that repeated endlessly. Beautiful work, once. Now they were coated in ash, and the ground beneath them was black, and the silence was the kind of silence that has weight to it. My extraction point was 2 kilometers northeast. If I kept moving, stayed low, and did not do anything foolish, I would be back at the coalition perimeter before dark. That was the plan. Then I heard it. Not a scream, not a cry, something quieter and harder to ignore than either of those things. A low, rhythmic clicking sound, coming from beneath a collapsed section of archway about 30 meters to my left, soft and steady and deliberate, like someone tapping a message in a language I did not speak, but could feel in my chest anyway. I stopped. I told myself to keep moving. I stopped anyway. She was buried under 2 slabs of pale stone, small enough that I almost missed her in the gray dust. Veltari, female, young, very young, maybe the equivalent of 14 years old by the way her growth plates looked in the light. She had 6 limbs like all her kind, 4 long primary ones and 2 smaller secondary ones folded close to her chest, and her skin was doing something extraordinary, flickering between a soft blue-green and a dim, struggling white. I would learn later that the flickering meant her blood pressure was crashing. At the time, I only knew it looked like a candle fighting to stay lit. Her lower 2 limbs were pinned under the stone. I could see, even from where I stood, that they were badly damaged. What I also saw, printed clearly in the ash around her, were footprints. Adult Veltari, several of them. The long 3-toed prints unmistakable. They had been here. They had stood in a cluster, right where I was standing, close enough to reach down and touch her. And then they had walked away. I stood there for 3 full seconds doing the math. She weighed maybe 30 kilos, and I had a bad knee, and the Kethar were sweeping the district on a schedule I had already memorized, and my extraction window was closing. I ran every number the same way the Veltari had, clean and clear and cold. And then I put the math down like it was someone else's problem, and went to help her. Getting the stones off her took 4 minutes and more of my back than I was happy about. She was semi-conscious, and she tried to push me away twice with her upper limbs, weakly, the way someone pushes away help when they have been taught their whole life that needing help is a kind of failure. I did not argue. I just kept working. My field med kit was not designed for Veltari anatomy. I improvised. Splints from 2 pieces of broken archway stone, bound with strips I tore from the lower half of my uniform. It was not pretty. It would hold. I had done worse with less. When I lifted her, she made a sharp, surprised clicking sound that I felt fairly certain was an expression of shock. She was light, lighter than I expected, and she held herself rigid in my arms for the first 3 minutes as I moved, like she was bracing for me to change my mind and put her down. I did not put her down. After a while, she stopped holding herself rigid. About 40 minutes into the walk, she managed 2 words in trade pidgin, the rough common language that passed between species out here on the frontier. Her voice was hoarse, and the words came out unsteady, but they were clear. "You are miscalculating," she said. I adjusted her weight in my arms and kept walking. "Yeah," I said. "I do that a lot." She did not respond to that, but something in how she held herself shifted, just slightly, and she did not try to push me away again. Her name, I pieced together over the next hour, was Avon. She gave it to me in fragments, click sounds and pigeon words mixed together, and I repeated the click sounds back to her until I got them close enough that she stopped wincing. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was trying to learn them. I was surprised by how quickly the patterns came to me. Soldiers are good at patterns. It is how we stay alive. We moved through the ruins slowly, carefully. I had her route memorized beside my own now. two lines of safety threading through the same map of danger. She knew the settlement's layout, the hidden passages, the places where walls had collapsed into tunnels you could slide through without being seen from above. I knew the Kethar patrol timing, the frequency sweep of their drones, the exact distance their sensors could detect heat signatures in open ground versus covered ground. Between the two of us, we were doing pretty well for a pair of people who had almost nothing. An hour before dark, we found shelter in the remains of what had been a storage building, 3 of 4 walls still standing, the roof open to the sky, but surrounded by taller rubble on all sides that blocked sightlines from above. I set Avon down gently against the most solid wall. She was pale, her flickering skin gone mostly dim and still, which I had learned meant she was exhausted and conserving what she had. I gave her both ration bars. She looked at them, and then looked at me with those wide, dark, slightly luminous eyes. "You require nutrition," she said carefully. "I am fine," I said. "That is not accurate." "It is accurate enough." She held one of the bars out toward me. I took it, ate about a third of it, and handed it back. She looked at what I had left her, and then, slowly, carefully, ate it. She ate the second one herself, without argument, which I counted as progress. I told her I was going to rest for 2 hours before we moved again. I ate the last of my third of the bar, set my internal alarm with the small device I kept clipped to my wrist, closed my eyes, and listened to the silence of the ruined city around us. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, in very careful pidgin, "Why did you not leave me?" It was not quite a question. It came out flat, curious, like she was genuinely trying to understand the mechanism of a thing that did not match any model she had. I thought about it honestly. "Because you were breathing," I said. She was quiet again after that. I did not know what the answer meant to her. I did not know if it made any sense within whatever framework her people used to understand the world. I only knew it was true, and that true was the best I could offer. Just before I actually fell asleep, I felt something brush the back of my hand. Light. Careful. The touch of one of her smaller secondary limbs. There and gone in a second. I would learn later that in Veltari, that gesture meant something close to "I see you." A very specific thing. Different from recognition. Different from thanks. Something more like, "I am aware that you are real." I kept my eyes closed and did not say anything. We moved before dawn. The extraction point was a kilometer away, and for half of that distance we moved well. She had recovered enough to manage some of the path on her own, using her upper limbs along the walls and her undamaged lower limbs carefully, and I stayed close, one hand always within reach. It was in the last 400 meters that they found us. 4 Kethar soldiers came around the corner of a broken building like they had been waiting, which, I realized in the space of half a second, they probably had. They were armored, professional, moving in the tight, precise formation of people who did this routinely and expected it to go easily. Their weapons were already raised. I learned later that Avon was a senator's daughter, that she had not simply been abandoned by her escort in the panic of the bombardment, that there had been a moment of terrible choice, and the Kethar had come behind the chaos to finish something that had been started. That she had been a target before I ever found her. None of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was 4 soldiers with raised weapons, a young girl behind me with 2 bad limbs, half a magazine, and a wall to my left that would give me exactly 1 second of cover if I moved immediately. I moved. I do not remember deciding to be angry. Anger is not usually something I decide. It arrives, the way weather arrives, and I have learned over the years to let it be useful rather than loud. But this was different. This was the kind of anger that comes from watching footprints walk away from someone still breathing. From understanding, in the clearest possible terms, that these soldiers had come here specifically to finish the job that those footprints had started. To make sure she did not survive. Something about that particular fact took all my calculations and simply overruled them. I went around the wall fast and low. The first shot took out the sensor array on the lead soldier's helmet, which was partially luck and partially the result of having spent 3 years learning where those arrays were placed on Kethar armor. The second shot I did not take. I closed the distance instead and made it physical, which is never elegant, but is sometimes effective against opponents whose threat modeling does not account for someone choosing to be that close on purpose. The lead soldier went down hard. I took a hit in the shoulder. It was not good. I filed it away and kept moving. The third and fourth soldiers hesitated. That was what I noticed most. In the middle of all of it, they hesitated. Cathar soldiers are trained thoroughly, well-equipped, experienced. They do not hesitate against opponents who are outgunned and injured. But there is, apparently, something difficult about an opponent who responds to being outgunned and injured by being more committed rather than less. Their calculations were built for opponents who, when the numbers were bad, would slow down. I did not slow down. I could not tell you why, except that slowing down was not a choice I seemed to have access to at that moment. They retreated, both of them, quickly and without speaking, the way professionals retreat when the tactical situation has moved outside what their training covered. I stood in the rubble and breathed. My shoulder was sending me very clear information about its condition. I acknowledged the information and looked back. Avon had not moved from where I had left her. She was pressed against the wall, both sets of limbs very still, her skin blazing, actually blazing, brighter than I had seen it since the moment I found her. A vivid, steady blue-white light. She was staring at me. I walked back to her. My knee had decided this would be a good moment to remind me of its own opinions. I sat down against the wall beside her and took 3 slow breaths. "We should keep moving," I said. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, in the most careful pidgin she had managed yet, "What you just did does not make sense." "I know," I said. "The numbers were not in your favor." "No," I agreed. "You knew that." "Yes." She looked at me for a long moment, and her skin held that steady, extraordinary light. And she said something then in full Veltari, a long phrase I could not follow, and she did not translate it. Not then. I found out later what it meant, from a linguist at the coalition base who laughed when she told me, not unkindly, and said there was no real pidgin equivalent. The closest she could get was, "He burned for her." The coalition extraction team found us 11 minutes later. I had sent the signal from the wall, while Avon was still staring at me. They came in fast and professional, medical team alongside the soldiers, and they were good people who asked no unnecessary questions, and got us both out clean. I received a formal reprimand for operational deviation. It was quietly dropped 6 weeks later. I was told, through channels, that certain parties had made certain representations to the review board. Avon recovered fully, 4 months of treatment at the Hegemony Medical Facility on Velthar Prime, and she walked out on all 6 limbs, which the doctors apparently considered remarkable. 8 months after Kira 7, she stood before the Veltari Hegemony's Advisory Council and gave testimony about humanity. I was not there. I heard about it the way soldiers hear about most things, second-hand, in pieces, across a table in a coalition mess hall, from someone who had read the official transcript. She spoke for 40 minutes. She covered everything with the precise, measured detail of her people. At the end, she put one question to the council. "When the calculation says to leave someone behind," she said, "when every number lines up and any reasonable mind would walk away, who in this galaxy will refuse?" The chamber was quiet. "I asked him once why he did not leave me," she said. "He told me, because you were breathing." That is his whole answer. That is all of it, and I submit to this council that a species capable of that answer is not a problem to be managed. It is the only ally worth having. 6 months later, I received a commendation on very nice paper with a gold seal on it, which I pinned to the inside of my locker where it would not embarrass anyone. There was a message with it. No greeting, no formal opening, because that is not how the Veltari do things. One line in trade pidgin. "I see you, Marcus Hale." I looked up the one word I had not known. Then I sat down on the edge of my bunk in a quiet barracks room and read it twice more. I kept it.